That's where Gaza comes in. Gaza is Israel's favorite shooting gallery. Even there, the feebly armed Islamic movement Hamas had defiantly resisted Israeli dictate, and in June 2008 even forced Israel to agree to a ceasefire. Well, Hamas is the designated target to restore Israel's deterrence capacity, to restore the Arab world's fear of Israel. How are they going to do it? Well, they did have a problem. The problem was Gaza was obviously not, Hamas was obviously not a military force. And if you defeat Gaza or Hamas militarily, that's not going to impress your neighbors. It's not going to restore their fear of you, because Gaza was not a military force to begin with. Hamas was not a military force to begin with. So what do? Well, the other option was to wreak enough destruction, cause enough killing, wreak enough murder and mayhem, that would restore the Arab world's fear of you. Basically not defeating your enemy militarily, but simply wreaking destruction on the civilians and civilian infrastructure. And Israel had a name for this. I suspect some people here in this room are from Lebanon. Anyone here from Lebanon? Oh, that's quite a showing. I didn't expect that. Well, as most of you know, in Lebanon, the south suburb of Beirut is called the Dahya. And the Dahya is basically composed of 4 Shia Muslims who are a major popular base for the Hezbollah. And during the 2006 war, Israel went in and turned the Dahya into a parking lot. It used to be mostly 6-story apartment buildings. By the end of the war, it looked like a bombed-out shell. For those of you who have seen pictures of World War II after the terror bombing, that's what the Dahya looked like. And Israel was very thrilled by what it did in the Dahya, and it began to talk about, beginning in 2007, it began talking about the Dahya strategy. And the Dahya strategy, they were very honest about what it was about. To quote one Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, Israeli Defense Forces commander, he said, "We shall pulverize the 160 Shiite villages in Lebanon that have turned into Shiite army bases. We shall not show mercy when it comes to hitting the national infrastructure of Lebanon." A reserve colonel writing in the Israeli Strategic Institute for National Security Studies said, "If there's hostilities, we have to act immediately, decisively, and with force that is disproportionate." After a Palestinian rocket attack, Israel's Interior Minister said in late September 2008, the IDF should decide on a neighborhood in Gaza and level it. That was basically the strategy, to pulverize the civilian population and infrastructure, and that way restore your deterrence capacity. As the Gaza massacre got underway, the operative plan was very candidly expressed. A reserve major general, what we have to do is act systematically with the aim of punishing all the organizations that are firing the rockets and mortars, as well as the civilians who are enabling them to fire and hide. And it has to be said that the strategy worked with considerable success. In the first couple of days of the Lebanon war in 2006, Israel killed about 55 Lebanese civilians. In the first couple of days of the Gaza massacre, it wasn't a mere 55 they killed. They killed in the first couple of days about 300 Palestinians. Several days into the slaughter, a leading Israeli strategic analyst, he wrote, "The IDF, which planned to attack buildings and sites populated by hundreds of people, did not warn them in advance to leave, but intended to kill a great many of them and succeeded. Some Israelis were quite thrilled by this display of Israeli firepower. Benny Morris, that sometime historian, full-time propagandist, he boasted Israel's highly efficient air assault on Hamas. Not all Israelis were so impressed. There was, for example, B. Michael, the columnist, who said it's not very impressive to send in helicopter gunships and jet planes over a giant prison and firing at its people. Who are these people they were firing at, the Israelis? Well, Gideon Levy, that columnist I mentioned to you earlier from Haaretz, he describes, I guess it was in the first or second day, he says, who are they? Who was Israel targeting? He says, 70 traffic cops at their graduation ceremony, young men in desperate search of a livelihood who thought they'd found it in the police and instead found death from the skies. Was that graduation ceremony the result of a fog of war, a misunderstanding, bad intelligence, a misfire? No. The Israelis freely admitted after the massacre they had spent several months deciding, are we going to target that graduation ceremony? Is it legal under international law to target young kids who are at their graduation ceremony waiting to be traffic cops? The Israelis decided it's legal, let's go ahead and get the work done.